Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening up quite a stack of sources dealing with something pretty profound, maybe even a bit unsettling. We're talking about bodies that seem to defy the natural order, resisting decay long after death. This incredible phenomenon, sometimes called incorruptibility. Well, when it happens to a revered figure, a saint, a prophet, you have to ask, right? Is it truly a sign of holiness, divine favor? Or is it maybe just the right mix of, I don't know, chemistry, climate, the burial place?
Yeah, that's exactly the line we're walking today. It's that fascinating space between the potentially miraculous and the, well, scientifically explainable. We've gathered material from all over different faiths, different eras. We're unpack the theological ideas from Islam, Christianity, Buddhism.
And compare them directly.
Compare them directly with the scientific explanations for how bodies can be naturally preserved. And we'll also look at some really unique cultural practices around this. It should be quite the journey.
Okay, sounds good. Let's dive in. So our sources suggest that for a lot of belief systems, having some kind of physical sign of distinction after death, it matters a lot, starting with the Abrahamic traditions.
Yes, let's start there. In Islam, there's a foundational belief rooted in the Hadith. It's quite explicit. The saying goes, Allah has forbidden the earth to consume the bodies of the prophets.
Forbidden. Wow, so not just luck or chance?
Exactly. It's seen as a specific divine act, a mark of unique honor that sets the prophets apart, reinforcing their sacred role even after death. It's a sign of their special status.
Okay. And moving over to Christianity, particularly within Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, this idea of the body resisting decay, it's also significant, right? Though maybe in a slightly different way.
It is, yeah. It's considered a potential miracle, not essential for sainthood, but certainly strong confirmatory evidence looked for during the canonization process.
A potential miracle, and the theology behind that.
Well, it connects directly to the belief in the resurrection of the body. You know, the idea that our physical bodies will be restored. The scriptural link often cited is 1 Corinthians 15, talking about the perishable body being raised imperishable. So an incorrupt body is seen as a kind of foretaste.
A physical sign of that ultimate promise. It makes something abstract feel very real, I imagine.
Precisely. It offers the faithful something tangible. And you have these incredibly famous examples that people can, well, sometimes even see.
Like Saint Bernadette Soubirous, the visionary from Lourdes.
Exactly. Her body is preserved and displayed in Nevers, France. And also Saint John Vianney, the Curé d'Ars. His body was found remarkably intact upon exhumation. Seeing those images, or even visiting, it has a powerful impact.
Definitely. Okay, so that's Islam and Christianity. What about Eastern traditions? Buddhism, for instance. Does this phenomenon show up there?
Oh, absolutely. But the interpretation shifts. It's less about external divine favor and more about supreme internal spiritual achievement.
Internal achievement. How so?
Well, take the Tibetan Buddhist concept of tukdam. This refers to highly accomplished lamas or monks who die while in a deep state of meditation. And their bodies apparently can remain upright, lifelike, sometimes even warm, and completely undecayed for days or even weeks after clinical death.
Weeks. Wow, so the idea is their mastery of mind continues even after death.
That's the understanding, yes. Consciousness maintaining influence over the physical form at the very point of transition.
That's incredible, but there's an even more, maybe extreme example of intentional preservation in Japan. Sokushin Butsu.
Ah, yes. Sokushin Butsu. This is, well, it's quite something. These were monks who actively sought to mummify their own bodies while still living.
While alive. How is that even possible? It sounds, frankly, horrific.
It does sound extreme, and the process described in our sources was incredibly arduous, taking years. It involved intense asceticism, self-discipline, and a very specific diet. First, things like pine needles, nuts, seeds to strip away body fat.
Okay, that makes sense. Removing fuel for decay.
Right. And then in the final stages, they would sometimes ingest small amounts of toxic sap from the urushi tree.
Toxic sap? Why would they do that?
It sounds counterintuitive, but the sources suggest a dual purpose. First, it induced vomiting and fluid loss, further dehydrating the body. Second, the toxicity made the body tissues essentially poisonous to bacteria and insects after death.
So they were essentially embalming themselves from the inside out.
Pretty much.
What?
They viewed it not as a passive miracle, but as the ultimate act of spiritual discipline and transcendence over the physical, a conscious attainment.
That intentionality is so different from the idea of divine protection. It's fascinating. And then there's that modern case that sort of bridges these worlds. Dashi Dorzo Itigilov?
Yes, the Buryat Lama. Died in 1927, meditating in the lotus position. He asked to be exhumed later, and decades later they did.
And he was found preserved.
Remarkably so, according to reports. So there you have this figure, revered spiritually, whose preservation draws intense interest from both religious followers and, scientists.
Right. Before we move to the science, though, just quickly, not all faiths focus on preserving the whole body, do they?
No, definitely not. It's a good point. Judaism, for instance, generally emphasizes very rapid burial. Returning the body to the earth quickly is paramount. Embalming, like Jacob in Genesis, is seen more as a practical exception, often due to circumstances like transport.
And Hinduism?
Hinduism typically prioritizes cremation. The focus is on releasing the soul, and relic veneration centers more on ashes or bone fragments, not usually the intact preserved body. So preserving the flesh isn't the goal there.
Okay, so we have these powerful religious interpretations, divine honor, spiritual mastery. But then there's the other side, the, let's say, less mystical explanation. What does science say? Can it account for St. Bernadette and the Buryat Lama?
Well, the scientific perspective is pretty clear. Preservation isn't inherently miraculous. It's the result of specific environmental conditions that effectively halt or drastically slow down decomposition.
And decomposition is basically driven by
bacteria, fungi, and the body's own enzymes. They need certain conditions to thrive: moisture, oxygen, the right temperature. If you take those away, you stop decay in its tracks.
Okay. So what are the main ways that happens naturally? Our sources outline a few key mechanisms, right?
They do. 4 main ones. Let's start with maybe the most obvious: extreme cold, freezing.
Like putting something in the freezer.
Exactly. Low temperatures just stop all biological activity, bacterial growth, enzymatic action, everything. The classic example here has to be Ötzi the Iceman.
Found in the Alps, millennia old, right?
Yes, over 5,000 years old. Preserved incredibly well simply because he was frozen solid in a glacier. It was the environment, not any special property of Ötzi himself.
Okay, so cold works. What's next?
The opposite, in a way. Extreme dryness, desiccation.
So drying out, like jerky.
Sort of, yeah. If a body loses moisture very rapidly after death, faster than bacteria can multiply, it effectively mummifies naturally. Think arid deserts, or sometimes even sealed dry tombs or coffins. No water, no microbial life.
Makes sense. What's the third mechanism?
Absence of oxygen. Anoxic conditions. The best examples come from peat bogs.
Peat bogs. Why are they so good at preservation?
Well, bogs are waterlogged, which you might think helps decay, but crucially, they lack oxygen. Most decay bacteria need oxygen, they're aerobic. Plus, bog water is often highly acidic and contains tannins, the same stuff used to tan leather, which inhibit bacterial growth and sort of tan the skin.
Okay. And that gives us those amazing bog bodies.
Exactly, like Torajan in Denmark, found with skin, hair, even his last meal preserved after centuries. The lack of oxygen and the specific water chemistry did the work.
Incredible. So cold, dry, no oxygen. What's the fourth one?
Chemical preservation. This can happen when the body is exposed to specific minerals or chemicals in the soil or burial environment. The most well-known result is something called adipocere.
Adipocere, I've heard that called grave wax. What actually is it? You mentioned saponification.
Yeah, saponification is the key process. Think about how soap is made. It's a reaction between fats and alkalis. In certain burial conditions, typically cool, damp, and maybe alkaline soil, the body's own fats can undergo this chemical transformation. They turn into this hard, waxy, soap-like substance.
So the fat itself turns into a protective layer.
Pretty much. This adipocere layer can then shield the deeper tissues from decay. It's not perfect preservation usually, but it can be quite effective.
Okay, so with these 4 mechanisms, cold, dry, no oxygen, chemical changes like adipocere, the scientific argument is that most, if not all, cases of incorruptibility can be explained by one or combination of these.
That's the core scientific position, yes. A saint buried in a particularly dry, cool, sealed crypt might naturally desiccate or form adipocere, regardless of their piety. The chemistry and physics are the determining factors.
So from this perspective, the miracle is more about the discovery of a preserved body under favorable conditions rather than the preservation itself.
You could definitely argue that. And it leads to the skeptical viewpoint, which brings up things like confirmation bias.
Meaning we remember the preserved ones and forget all the ones that decayed naturally.
Exactly. And skeptics also point out that when some revered bodies are exhumed, they aren't always perfectly preserved. There might be signs of partial decay, or even, well, evidence of human intervention after death.
Intervention? Like what?
Things like applying wax coatings, sometimes masks, or other restorative treatments to make the remains more presentable for veneration. The case of St. Pio, for example, involved a post-mortem treatment with a silicone-like substance. So it's not always purely natural preservation.
Right, so we've covered natural preservation, whether interpreted religiously or scientifically. But what about deliberate artificial preservation?
Yes.
Humans taking control.
Now you're talking about the masters. And for that, we really have to look at ancient Egypt.
Pharaoh Ramesses II, his mummy is famous.
And for good reason. Egyptian embalming wasn't accidental, and it wasn't just hoping for a miracle. It was a highly sophisticated, ritualized, human-driven process based on their religious beliefs about the afterlife, the Ka and Ba needing the body.
What were the key steps? It wasn't just wrapping in linen, was it?
Oh no, far more complex. They started by removing the internal organs, lungs, stomach, intestines, liver, because those decay fastest due to bacteria. Usually the heart was left, seen as the seat of intelligence.
Okay, removing the organs makes sense. Then what?
Sterilizing the body cavity, often with palm wine. But the absolutely crucial step was dehydration. They used natron.
Natron. You mentioned that earlier. It's a type of salt.
It's a natural salt mixture, mostly sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. They would pack the body inside and out with piles of dry natron and leave it for about 40 days.
40 days, just drawing it out completely.
Exactly. It wicked away almost all the moisture, achieving that extreme dryness we talked about, but artificially and very thoroughly. Then came anointing with oils, resins, and finally, the elaborate wrapping. It was true mastery of preservation technology for its time.
Amazing. Now let's jump from ancient Egypt to something very different, a living cultural practice. The Torajan people in Indonesia, our sources mention them.
Yes, the Torajans of Sulawesi. This offers a completely different perspective on keeping the dead present. It's not really about preventing decay perfectly, but about an ongoing relationship with the deceased.
How does that work? I read they sometimes keep the deceased at home for a long time.
They do. After someone dies, they're often referred to as tamola, meaning a sick person. They might be kept in the family home, sometimes treated with preservatives like formalin, for months or even years until the family can afford the massive, elaborate funeral ceremony.
Living with a deceased relative for years, that's hard to imagine for many cultures.
It is, but for the Torajans, the funeral marks the transition to the afterlife, not the end of the relationship. The deceased remain part of the community fabric.
And then there's the Ma'nene ceremony.
Right. This happens periodically, often every few years. Families exhume the bodies of their ancestors from their burial sites.
Exhume them? What do they do then?
They carefully clean the remains, dress them in new clothes, sometimes even repair the coffins. Then they might carry or parade them around the village.
Wow. What's the purpose of that? It's not about sainthood or miracles.
No, it's about remembrance, respect, and maintaining connections. It literally keeps the ancestors visible and physically part of the ongoing life of the community. It profoundly blurs the lines between life and death, keeping those social bonds strong across generations.
That's fascinating. So we've gone from prophets and saints to pharaohs and Torajan ancestors, all these different ways bodies endure or are made to endure. Looking across all these sources, what does this deep fascination tell us about? Well, about us, about humanity.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? When you synthesize all these examples, the religious, the scientific, the cultural, a few core human impulses really stand out. First, I think, is the fundamental desire to confront mortality. Decay is terrifying. It represents dissolution, finality. A preserved body, whether it's Itzi or a saint, offers this powerful visual counter-narrative. It whispers possibility, endurance.
Like a physical pushback against the inevitable end.
Exactly. Second, there's the immense power of memory and legacy. An abstract teaching or a cherished ancestor can feel distant, but a physical body, or even a relic, that's an anchor.
It makes past concrete.
Right. Seeing St. Bernadette helps anchor faith in her story. Parading a Torajan ancestor keeps their memory literally walking among the living. It makes legacy tangible and accessible.
Okay, confronting death, anchoring memory. What's the third theme?
I'd say it's the desire for the sacred, or maybe the separation of the special from the ordinary. In religious contexts especially, an incorrupt body becomes a physical marker. It says, this person was different. This person touched the divine or achieved something beyond normal human limits. It validates faith, reinforces teachings by providing physical proof of exceptionalism.
So, whether it's interpreted as a miracle, a feat of spiritual discipline, a result of bog chemistry, or careful embalming, The common thread is this human need to find or create something permanent in the face of death and time.
I think that's right. The whole topic really becomes a microcosm of that age-old dialogue, doesn't it? Between faith and reason, belief and science, both trying to make sense of our mortality.
A really powerful intersection.
And maybe that leaves us with a final thought to ponder, something for you listening to consider. If science gets better and better at understanding, even replicating, the exact conditions, the temperature, the humidity, the lack of oxygen, the chemical baths that lead to this kind of preservation.
If we can essentially create incorruptibility in a lab,
Right, does that demystification somehow lessen the spiritual power or the wonder we feel when we encounter these stories from the past? Or does it actually just highlight something deeper? Does it maybe just underscore this incredibly persistent, universal human drive to find physical evidence, any evidence, that some part of us, whether it's spirit, memory, or even just matter, can somehow endure, can triumph over decay and the passage of time? Something to think about.